Welcome to History Explained, where we illuminate the past to better understand our present. I'm your guide to your daily journey through the past to empower the future. Today is Saturday, May 24, 2025. As we do every Saturday, we're exploring a significant military engagement that shaped the course of history. Today, we turn our attention to the Battle of Midway, a decisive naval battle fought from June 4-7, 1942, that marked a turning point in the Pacific theater of World War II. In just 4 days of intense combat, the balance of naval power in the Pacific shifted dramatically, with profound strategic consequences that would influence the remainder of the war. What makes the Battle of Midway particularly fascinating is how it demonstrates the role of intelligence, decision-making, tactical innovation, and even chance in determining military outcomes. Often described as one of history's most consequential naval battles, Midway offers a compelling case study in how seemingly minor advantages can produce outsized results when leveraged effectively. So let's explore this pivotal World War II engagement, examining the strategic context that led to the battle, the critical intelligence breakthrough that gave American forces an edge, the dramatic 4 days of combat, and the far-reaching consequences of this American victory. To understand the significance of Midway, we must first examine the strategic situation in the Pacific in mid-1942. 6 months earlier, on December 7, 1941, Japan had launched a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, crippling much of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and drawing the United States into World War II. In the months following Pearl Harbor, Imperial Japan had achieved a remarkable series of victories, capturing the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, and numerous Pacific islands. These conquests secured vital natural resources, particularly oil, and established a defensive perimeter to protect Japan's home islands and its newly acquired empire. Despite these successes, Admiral Yamamoto, the commander-in-chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, remained concerned about America's industrial potential and its ability to recover from the Pearl Harbor attack. He believed Japan needed to extend its defensive perimeter further and, crucially, eliminate the remaining U.S. carrier force that had escaped destruction at Pearl Harbor. The American aircraft carriers had become a particular focus for Yamamoto because they had escaped the Pearl Harbor attack by chance. They were at sea on training exercises. In the months following Pearl Harbor, these carriers had conducted a series of raids on Japanese positions, including the Doolittle raid of April 18, 1942, in which B-25 bombers launched from the USS Hornet struck targets in Tokyo and other Japanese cities. While the Doolittle raid caused minimal physical damage, it had a significant psychological impact on the Japanese leadership. The raid demonstrated that Japan's home islands were vulnerable to attack, something many Japanese had believed impossible. For Yamamoto, it reinforced the necessity of eliminating the American carrier threat once and for all. Yamamoto developed an elaborate plan centered on capturing Midway Atoll, a small but strategically located American base approximately 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. Midway would provide an advance base from which Japan could threaten Hawaii and intercept American ships approaching from the U.S. West Coast. More importantly, Yamamoto believed that the threat to Midway would force the remaining American carriers to respond, allowing the superior Japanese naval force to ambush and destroy them. The Japanese plan was complex, involving multiple fleet elements and diversionary attacks. A separate Japanese force would invade the Aleutian Islands off Alaska to draw American attention and forces away from Midway. Meanwhile, the main Japanese carrier striking force, the Kido Butai, consisting of 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, under the command of Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, would approach Midway from the northwest. A separate invasion force would follow to occupy the atoll after it had been neutralized by air attacks. From a purely numerical perspective, Japan appeared to have overwhelming advantages. The Japanese fleet had more ships, more aircraft, and more combat experience than the American forces. Furthermore, Japanese naval aviators were among the best trained and most experienced in the world, many having gained combat experience in Japan's war against China. The United States, still recovering from the Pearl Harbor attack, could muster only 3 aircraft carriers, USS Enterprise and USS Hornet from Task Force 16, commanded by Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, and USS Yorktown from Task Force 17, commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher. The Yorktown had been severely damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea just a month earlier, and repair estimates suggested it would require 3 months of shipyard repairs. Remarkably, emergency repairs at Pearl Harbor made it seaworthy in just 48 hours, allowing it to participate in the coming battle. What the Japanese could not know was that their elaborate plan had been compromised by a critical American intelligence breakthrough. U.S. Navy cryptanalysts, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort at the Combat Intelligence Unit, Station HYPO, in Pearl Harbor, had partially broken the Japanese naval code, known as JN-25. Through painstaking analysis, Rochefort's team had determined that a major Japanese operation was planned against a target designated as AF. To confirm their suspicion that AF referred to Midway, the Americans implemented an ingenious ruse. They instructed the Midway garrison to send an uncoded radio message reporting that their water purification system had broken down. Shortly thereafter, American cryptanalysts intercepted a Japanese message reporting that AF was short of fresh water. This confirmed beyond doubt that AF was indeed Midway, giving the Americans the priceless advantage of knowing when and where the Japanese would attack. Armed with this intelligence, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, made the crucial decision to position his limited carrier forces northeast of Midway, where they could ambush the Japanese striking force. This decision placed American ships where the Japanese least expected them to be, enabling the element of surprise. The battle began on June 3, when a U.S. Navy PBY Catalina flying boat spotted a Japanese transport group heading toward Midway. Early on June 4, additional PBYs located the Japanese carrier striking force, approximately 200 miles northwest of Midway. At about 4:30 a.m. on June 4, Vice Admiral Nagumo launched the first wave of Japanese aircraft, 108 planes, to attack Midway. He retained a second wave of aircraft on his carriers, armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs for use against any American ships that might be located. This decision, reasonable based on the information available to Nagumo, would later prove fateful. The Japanese aircraft reached Midway at approximately 6:30 a.m. and conducted a bombing raid on the island's facilities. While they inflicted significant damage, the U.S. Marine Corps fighters and anti-aircraft defenses on Midway managed to shoot down several Japanese aircraft. More importantly, the Japanese flight leader radioed back that a second strike would be necessary to neutralize Midway's defenses completely. Meanwhile, beginning around 6 a.m., Midway-based aircraft had begun attacking the Japanese carrier force. These attacks, conducted by obsolete aircraft and inexperienced crews, achieved no hits and suffered heavy losses. However, they forced the Japanese carriers to continue combat air patrols and evasive maneuvers, adding to the complexity of their operations. Upon receiving the report that a second strike on Midway would be necessary, Admiral Nagumo faced a critical decision. He ordered the aircraft of his second wave, which had been armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs for use against ships, to be rearmed with land bombs for a second strike on Midway. This rearming process required time and created considerable confusion on the hangar decks of the Japanese carriers, with ordnance stacked and fuel lines stretched across the decks. At approximately 7:28 a.m., in the midst of this complex rearming operation, a Japanese scout plane reported the sighting of American ships. Shortly thereafter, the scout clarified its report, stating, "Enemy force accompanied by what appears to be a carrier." Nagumo now faced a dilemma. Should he proceed with the planned second strike on Midway, or should he hold back aircraft to prepare for an attack on the newly discovered American ships? After some hesitation, Nagumo reversed his earlier decision and ordered the second wave of aircraft to be rearmed yet again, this time with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs for use against the American ships. This meant that the ordnance had to be moved again, further increasing congestion and confusion below decks on the Japanese carriers. While Nagumo was dealing with these challenging decisions, American carrier aircraft had launched and were en route to attack the Japanese fleet. The American strikes were not coordinated. Differences in aircraft speed, launch times, and navigational errors meant that various squadrons arrived over the Japanese fleet at different times. The first American carrier aircraft to attack were the slow torpedo bombers, 15 Douglas TBD Devastators from USS Hornet, Torpedo Squadron 8, followed by 14 from USS Enterprise, Torpedo Squadron 6, and finally 12 from USS Yorktown, Torpedo Squadron 3. Flying at just 100 knots, without fighter escort, and using unreliable torpedoes, these obsolete aircraft faced a virtual suicide mission against the Japanese combat air patrol of Agile Zero fighters. The results were devastating for the American torpedo squadrons. Torpedo 8 from Hornet lost all 15 aircraft, with Ensign George Gay the sole survivor. Torpedo 6 from Enterprise lost 10 of 14 aircraft. Torpedo 3 from Yorktown lost 10 of 12 aircraft. Despite their extraordinary courage, not a single torpedo hit was scored on the Japanese carriers. However, these seemingly futile attacks served a crucial, unintended purpose. The Japanese combat air patrol had been drawn down to wave-top height to intercept the torpedo bombers. Meanwhile, Japanese carriers were maneuvering radically to avoid torpedoes, with their flight decks cluttered by aircraft and ordnance in the midst of the rearming process. At this critical moment, at approximately 10:25 a.m., 3 squadrons of American dive bombers arrived over the Japanese fleet. Led by Lieutenant Commander C. Wade McCluskey from Enterprise and Lieutenant Commander Maxwell F. Leslie from Yorktown, these Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers found the Japanese carriers in their most vulnerable state. In a 5-minute period, the American dive bombers transformed the battle. They hit 3 of the 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, with multiple 1,000-pound bombs. These bombs penetrated the flight decks and exploded among the aircraft, ordnance, and fuel lines below, igniting catastrophic fires and secondary explosions. Within minutes, all 3 carriers were effectively doomed, although Akagi would not be scuttled until the next day. Only one Japanese carrier, Hiryu, escaped the initial American attack. Under the command of Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, Hiryu quickly launched 2 waves of aircraft against the American carriers. The first wave found and hit USS Yorktown with 3 bombs, causing severe damage. The second wave struck the Yorktown again with 2 torpedoes, eventually forcing its abandonment. Despite this damage, American damage control teams had so effectively countered the initial bomb hits that the Japanese believed they had struck 2 different carriers. Late in the afternoon, American scout planes located Hiryu. Enterprise launched a final strike of dive bombers that hit Hiryu with 4 bombs, setting it ablaze. Like the other Japanese carriers, Hiryu would later be scuttled by Japanese destroyers. By the end of June 4th, all 4 Japanese carriers had been destroyed or fatally damaged. Admiral Yamamoto, monitoring the battle from the battleship Yamato far to the rear, recognized that the strategic balance had shifted decisively. Without air cover, his invasion force would be vulnerable to American air attack. After brief consideration of continuing the operation using his battleships, Yamamoto ordered a general retirement during the night of June 4-5. The battle was not quite over, however. On June 6, American aircraft attacked and sank the heavy cruiser Mikuma and severely damaged its sister ship Magami as the Japanese fleet retreated. Meanwhile, on June 5, a Japanese submarine located the abandoned but still floating USS Yorktown and the destroyer USS Hammond, which was alongside assisting with salvage operations. The submarine fired 4 torpedoes, 2 of which struck Yorktown and 1 of which broke the Hammond in half, sinking it quickly with heavy loss of life. Yorktown finally sank on the morning of June 7. The Battle of Midway resulted in a decisive American victory. The Japanese lost 4 fleet carriers with their irreplaceable aircrews. Over 100 experienced pilots were killed. They also lost a heavy cruiser and 248 aircraft. American losses, while significant, were comparatively lighter: 1 aircraft carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, and 307 men killed. The strategic implications of Midway were profound and far-reaching. The battle marked the first decisive defeat of Japanese naval forces in World War II and ended Japan's 6-month period of unchecked expansion in the Pacific. Most significantly, the loss of 4 fleet carriers and their experienced air groups severely crippled Japan's naval aviation, shifting the balance of naval power in the Pacific. Midway is often described as the turning point of the Pacific War, but this characterization requires some nuance. The battle did not immediately transform the strategic situation. Japan still held a vast empire, and the road to Tokyo remained long and difficult. What Midway did accomplish was to halt Japan's momentum and provide the United States with a crucial opportunity to bring its superior industrial capacity to bear. In the months and years following Midway, American shipyards would produce Essex-class aircraft carriers at a rate Japanese industry could not match. By 1944, the U.S. Navy would field more fleet carriers than Japan had started the war with, each carrying more aircraft than their Japanese counterparts. This industrial advantage, which Yamamoto had feared from the outset, would ultimately prove decisive in the Pacific War. Beyond the strategic outcomes, Midway offers several important insights into the nature of naval warfare in the aircraft carrier age. The battle demonstrated the decisive role of air power at sea. Surface ships, even powerful battleships, were vulnerable without air cover. It underscored the importance of scouting and intelligence. The American victory relied heavily on knowing Japanese intentions in advance. And it highlighted how quickly fortunes could change in carrier battles, where the side that located and struck the enemy first often prevailed. Midway also illustrates the crucial role of training, experience, and doctrine. American dive bomber pilots had trained extensively in attacking naval targets, a capability that proved decisive on June 4. Japanese naval aviators, while individually more experienced, were hampered by rigid doctrine and inadequate defensive coordination. Furthermore, Japanese damage control procedures proved inferior to American methods, as illustrated by the USS Yorktown's ability to absorb and temporarily recover from major bomb and torpedo hits. The battle has been extensively studied for its lessons in leadership and decision-making under pressure. Admiral Nimitz's decision to trust his intelligence officers and position his limited forces where they could ambush the superior Japanese fleet proved crucial. Admiral Spruance's cautious but effective command of Task Force 16 during the battle has been widely praised. In contrast, Admiral Nagumo has been criticized for his hesitation and indecision at critical moments, though it's important to recognize the difficult tactical situation he faced with incomplete information. Chance and timing also played significant roles at Midway. Had the American dive bombers arrived a few minutes earlier or later, they might have found the Japanese carriers in a less vulnerable state. Had the Japanese located the American carriers first, the outcome might have been very different. These elements of chance remind us that even the most carefully planned military operations remain subject to what Clausewitz called friction and the fog of war. The human dimension of Midway deserves particular attention. The courage of the American torpedo bomber pilots, who pressed home their attacks despite overwhelming odds and with minimal chance of survival, exemplifies the highest traditions of military service. Similarly, the Japanese sailors who fought to save their burning carriers, often at the cost of their lives, demonstrated extraordinary devotion to duty. The Battle of Midway has been memorialized in numerous books, films, and documentaries. Perhaps the most famous cinematic portrayal is the 1976 film, Midway, starring Charlton Heston and Henry Fonda, though a more recent version was released in 2019. These cultural representations have helped ensure that Midway remains one of the most widely recognized naval battles in history. For historians and military analysts, Midway continues to offer valuable insights into carrier operations, intelligence use, command decision-making, and the role of air power in naval warfare. The battle has been extensively studied at war colleges worldwide, with each generation of naval officers extracting lessons relevant to contemporary naval strategy and tactics. From a technological perspective, Midway marked a crucial moment in the evolution of naval warfare. The decisive role of aircraft carriers confirmed that the age of the battleship as the arbiter of naval power had passed. Future naval engagements would increasingly be fought at ranges of hundreds of miles, with aircraft as the primary offensive weapons. This transformation in naval warfare, which had begun tentatively in the interwar period, was conclusively demonstrated at Midway. As we reflect on the Battle of Midway from our vantage point over 8 decades later, several enduring lessons emerge. The battle demonstrates how intelligence advantages, when properly exploited, can offset numerical inferiority. It illustrates how seemingly small decisions can cascade into major outcomes in complex systems like naval warfare. And it underscores the importance of adaptability and resilience in military operations. Perhaps most importantly, Midway reminds us of the contingent nature of history. Had the battle gone differently, had Nagumo launched his full strike against the American carriers when first discovering them, had the American dive bombers not found the Japanese carriers at their most vulnerable moment, the subsequent course of the Pacific War might have unfolded very differently. This counterfactual perspective helps us appreciate the significance of what actually occurred on those 4 fateful days in June 1942. The Battle of Midway stands as a testament to the courage, skill, and determination of the men who fought it on both sides. It represents a pivotal moment when the seemingly unstoppable expansion of the Japanese Empire was checked, and the long, difficult road to Allied victory in the Pacific began. While many hard-fought battles lay ahead, after Midway, the strategic initiative in the Pacific War had irrevocably shifted. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of the Battle of Midway. Next week, we'll be back with our Innovations and Inventions episode, where we'll be examining the development of the Internet and its transformation from a military research project to a global communication system that has fundamentally reshaped human society. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. What aspects of the Battle of Midway or naval warfare in World War II do you find most interesting? Let us know in the comments section below. For our members, this Sunday we'll have a special roundup of military developments from the past week with additional historical context and analysis. We'll explore how current defense technologies and strategies connect to the historical evolution of warfare we've been examining in this series. Until next time, I'm your guide for History Explained, where we believe that understanding yesterday is the key to navigating tomorrow.